You didn't just watch Judge Boyd deliver a verdict in a crowded digital space. You watched millions of people emotionally accept an outcome from a courtroom that exists entirely as an algorithmic sanctuary. There is no official docket, no municipal record, and no actual trial behind the footage. Yet, when the video titled "A Desperate Father Chose His Daughter's Medicine Over a Shoplifting Charge" landed on your feed, it felt more authentic than any real world judicial broadcast. That immediate, visceral reaction is precisely the psychological phenomenon we need to dissect. I look at these viral courtroom narratives not as legal proceedings, but as engineered performance art designed to exploit a deep institutional vacuum in modern society. The emotional premise is mathematically optimized to capture attention. A heavy wooden gavel, the authoritative echo of legal jargon, and a defendant stripped of everything but raw vulnerability. In this specific narrative arc, we are introduced to a father standing before the bench, accused of a low-level property crime. He is caught shoplifting life-saving medicine for his critically ill daughter because he had no other financial choice. From a structural analysis perspective, the setup borrows the symbols of absolute legal authority to bypass your critical faculties. The dark wood paneling, the solemnity of the judicial robes, and the unyielding framework of the American justice system are simulated to perfection. Why do millions of viewers watch this performance without once asking for factual verification? They abstain from checking because the script provides something reality structurally denies: an absolute, immediate alignment of morality and systemic power. The digital algorithm understands that audiences are thoroughly exhausted by a reality where corporate or political power consistently evades accountability, while ordinary citizens are crushed by technicalities. When Judge Boyd looks down from his elevated bench at a trembling father who broke the law out of desperate love, he isn't acting as a real-world magistrate. He is performing the role of a proxy for the justice system society craves but cannot find. This is not a legal verdict. It is a meticulously constructed emotional release valve. To understand why the story of this desperate father feels unshakable, we must look closely at the mechanics of borrowed authority. The creator of the Judge Boyd persona doesn't just write a script. They construct a psychological framework using the precise vocabulary, cadence, and visual markers of the American legal system. When you watch the video, your brain immediately registers specific institutional cues: the heavy strike of the wooden gavel, the formal calling of the docket, and the deliberate use of first-person narration. The voice commanding the simulated room states, "I have sat behind this bench," instantly establishing an unearned hierarchy of trust. This first-person courtroom narration is highly effective because it directly exploits our deeply ingrained respect for institutional structures. From a young age, audiences are conditioned to believe that someone wearing judicial robes, speaking from an elevated platform, possesses a verified moral and legal clarity. The script deliberately weaponizes this conditioning. By adopting the precise terminology of the court, terms like citation, docket, mitigating circumstances, and dismissal, the narrative builds a profound illusion of legal realism. It forces you to focus entirely on the human drama of the law rather than the reality of the digital production. What you are experiencing isn't an authentic legal proceeding. It is a simulated performance of power. In a real municipal or criminal court, a shoplifting charge involving life-saving medication triggers an array of rigid, bureaucratic steps: police documentation, statutory minimums, state prosecutors, and financial balancing acts that rarely resolve in seconds of pure emotional closure. But the algorithm doesn't want the messy, unfeeling reality of the administrative state. It demands a pure distillation of authority. By removing the actual legal red tape and keeping only the theatrical symbols of justice, the performance creates a hyper-real environment where structural authority serves absolute moral goodness. When Judge Boyd leans forward and states that the court cares more about human life than property values, he is performing an act of narrative theft. He is borrowing the immense institutional weight of the judiciary to validate a completely fictional scenario. You believe the father's desperation is real, and you believe the judge's mercy is legally binding, because the performance provides the exact closure that real-world institutions routinely deny. The story succeeds not because it is factually true, but because it deploys the symbols of power with absolute, devastating precision. To dismantle the viral efficacy of a desperate father chose his daughter's medicine over a shoplifting charge, we must evaluate the precise anatomy of desperation embedded within the script. The narrative does not merely present a petty theft, it constructs a flawless moral paradox designed to weaponize the audience's baseline evolutionary instincts. By choosing a father as the protagonist and a dying child as the stakes, the story instantly activates what psychologists call the protective parental schema. The viewer is no longer evaluating a legal infraction against property rights. They are forced into an existential calculation where the law itself is cast as the ultimate antagonist. This specific narrative layer relies heavily on targeting the deepest emotional trigger points of the human psyche, the absolute fear of helplessness in the face of a loved one's suffering. When the script details the father walking into a sterile pharmacy, looking at medicine he cannot afford, and slipping it into his jacket, it triggers an immediate rush of empathy. The digital algorithm thrives on this specific chemical cascade. The presentation is systematically stripped of any messy real-world variables such as complex healthcare policies, insurance technicalities, or public assistance programs, and reduced to a primitive, binary choice: let a child suffer or break a human-made rule. In this performance, Judge Boyd acts as the mediator of this emotional trap. When he looks down from the bench and asks the father, "Why did you take it?" he isn't seeking a legal defense or an entry into a police report. He is prompting the delivery of the narrative's emotional payload. The script ensures the father's response is completely stripped of anger, entitlement, or defiance. His voice must be apologetic, soft, and trembling, signaling to the audience that he is a victim of a broken economic system rather than a threat to social order. This deliberate subversion of the criminal archetype is what guarantees the video's massive audience retention. The viewer cannot click away because the script has successfully blurred the lines between watching a digital video and witnessing a profound moral crisis. To scroll past would feel like abandoning a desperate parent in their darkest hour. Ultimately, this represents the monetization of empathy in its purest digital form. The creator understands that in a fragmented attention economy, profound sadness and parental love are the highest yielding currencies. By simulating a scenario where a father must steal to keep his daughter alive, the script creates an artificial emotional deficit that only Judge Boyd's impending validation can resolve. To fully understand the structural mechanics of a desperate father chose his daughter's medicine over a shoplifting charge, we must isolate the precise moment the script forces a confrontation between the written law and human survival. This is the turning point of the narrative, the dialogue of subversion. In a standard real-world legal setting, the text of the penal code is unyielding. A shoplifting charge is determined by act and intent to deprive an owner of property. However, in the algorithmic theater of Judge Boyd, the text of the law is deliberately collapsed to make way for a higher moral evaluation. The script achieves this by executing a highly calculated cross-examination that mimics legal inquiry but functions entirely as emotional validation. When Judge Boyd reviews the case file, the dialogue does not focus on the corporate pharmacy's loss, security footage, or statutory compliance. Instead, the narrative directs the judge to ask a question completely separated from standard legal procedure. Did you steal to profit, or did you steal to save a life? This binary framing is a psychological masterstroke designed by the creator to eliminate all moral ambiguity for the digital audience. By structuring the dialogue this way, the script completely subverts the traditional role of a magistrate. Judge Boyd ceases to be an enforcer of the state's rules and instead becomes an absolute protector of human necessity. The desperate father's admission that he would gladly face imprisonment if it meant his daughter survived another day serves as the emotional peak of this segment. This specific interaction is engineered to provoke an intense sense of systemic injustice within the viewer. The audience is systematically led to believe that a society forcing a parent to choose between legality and a child's survival is fundamentally broken. This structural collapse of the legal text is what prepares the audience for the final resolution. The creator understands that standard legal outcomes provide zero algorithmic value because they lack emotional gratification. By using the judicial bench to validate an illegal act under the banner of absolute parental devotion, the performance delivers an intense psychological payoff. It satisfies a profound societal desire to see rigid, unfeeling institutions bend to the weight of human love. The dialogue is not designed to establish legal precedent. It is written to maximize retention by making the viewer feel that true justice can only exist when the rulebook is completely discarded. To successfully decode the extraordinary resonance of the climactic sequence in A Desperate Father Chose His Daughter's Medicine Over a Shoplifting Charge, we must deconstruct the precise moment Judge Boyd delivers his ultimate verdict. This is not merely a simulated legal resolution. It is an emotional flashpoint engineered with mathematical precision to manipulate crowd psychology. When Judge Boyd looks directly at the trembling father and collapses the entire punitive framework with two simple words, case dismissed, he is not just liberating a fictional defendant. He is performing a ritual of absolute judicial absolution that viewers desperately crave in the real world, but almost never witness from cold public institutions. This strategic climax operates entirely on the psychological principle of emotional catharsis. Throughout the preceding segments, the script deliberately traps the audience inside a suffocating narrative of systemic injustice. A destitute father forced into a corner, and an unfeeling legal structure prepared to penalize the theft of life-saving medicine. This tension is pushed to its absolute limit through dramatic pauses, the authoritative echo of the gavel, and the judgmental weight of the black robes. When the absolution is finally granted, the accumulated psychological strain in the viewer's mind instantly collapses, replaced by a profound wave of relief and moral satisfaction. The digital algorithm recognizes and highly values this chemical cascade in the viewer's brain, converting this synthetic satisfaction into near-perfect audience retention until the final seconds of the video. Viewed through the lens of social media power analysis, Judge Boyd's ruling represents the perfect execution of the protector fantasy. In a society where massive pharmaceutical corporations consistently inflate drug prices and rigid administrative frameworks routinely crush vulnerable citizens, the viewer feels fundamentally powerless. The script masterfully transforms the elevated judicial bench into an ultimate sanctuary of moral justice, where the law no longer protects the property values of a corporate pharmacy, but instead validates the raw survival of a human life. The judge's assertion that the court has far more critical things to worry about than punishing a parent who broke a rule out of love functions as a direct ideological assault on the cold cynicism of real-world bureaucracy. This calculated subversion provides the audience with a profound psychological compensation for the daily, unaddressed injustices they endure in reality. The weaponization of absolute authority to shatter standard operational regulations is exactly what transforms a simple digital clip into a viral phenomenon. The viewer ceases to be a passive consumer of content. They become an active participant in a shared moral manifesto, sharing the video as proof that humanity can still triumph over unfeeling mechanical systems. This psychological game turns Judge Boyd's moment of absolution into an algorithmic peak, where manufactured empathy is directly monetized into explosive views and permanent channel growth. To fully dissect why A Desperate Father Chose His Daughter's Medicine Over a Shoplifting Charge achieves permanent algorithmic longevity, we must analyze the structural deployment of the strategic epilogue. A standard digital narrative often concludes at the point of maximum emotional catharsis, the dismissal of the criminal charge. However, the creator of the Judge Boyd persona understands that to convert a casual, short-form viewer into a permanently retained asset and subscriber, the script must engineer a secondary emotional payoff that operates retroactively. This is achieved by introducing a physical artifact of validation, the post-trial update, typically manifested as a shaky, handwritten letter hidden inside the magistrate's desk drawer. From a behavioral psychology perspective, the introduction of a letter written months after the simulated trial serves a dual structural purpose. First, it provides the digital audience with absolute narrative closure regarding the external stakes, the health of the dying daughter. When the narrator states, "I received a letter 2 months later," the script instantly shifts the timeline from a brief, isolated courtroom interaction into a continuous, lived reality. The viewer is informed that the father's desperate gamble succeeded, that the medicine stabilized the child's condition, or that she passed away peacefully without the added trauma of her father's incarceration. This narrative device completely validates Judge Boyd's decision to bypass the written law, proving to the audience that his subversion of institutional rules yielded a net positive in human capital. Second, the physical act of storing the letter in a desk drawer functions as an emotional anchor for the entire channel's ecosystem. The desk drawer is not merely a piece of courtroom furniture. It is written into the script as a sacred repository of human gratitude. By explicitly stating that the judge opens this drawer on hard days to remind himself why he took the job, the performance effectively humanizes the archetype of absolute power. It tells the audience that the judge is not an unfeeling agent of state control, but a deeply empathetic guardian who carries the emotional burdens of the public in his private spaces. This calculated orchestration of the epilogue is what creates the algorithmic tale, a phenomenon where a video continues to generate high engagement and shares weeks after its initial publication. The viewer does not leave the video feeling the cold indifference of a legal bureaucracy. They leave with a profound, almost spiritual reassurance that mercy possesses a permanent, real-world currency. The creator has successfully leveraged a fictional legal update to simulate an absolute moral order, ensuring that the audience remains permanently bonded to the Judge Boyd narrative framework. To fully dissect the internal logic of a desperate father chose his daughter's medicine over a shoplifting charge, we must isolate how the script executes a massive psychological maneuver: the weaponization of the good criminal archetype. In traditional narrative structures, a lawbreaker is positioned as an agent of chaos who disrupts social harmony. However, the creator of the Judge Boyd framework reverses this dynamic completely through a process called cognitive reframing. By casting the shoplifting father not as a thief, but as a tragic hero bound by an unyielding biological and moral duty, the script forces the audience to completely reevaluate their own ethical boundaries. This structural inversion is exactly what makes the video a masterclass in modern digital retention. The script accomplishes this cognitive shift by stripping the act of theft of any malicious or selfish intent. The father did not steal luxury items or cash. He stole a specific chemical compound required to keep a child breathing. By narrowing the scope of the infraction to pure survival, the narrative activates an evolutionary bias within the viewer's brain that prioritizes kin selection and tribal protection over institutional property rights. When Judge Boyd interrogates the defendant, his lines are meticulously written to enforce this reframing. The dialogue consciously avoids words like larceny, shrinkage, or restitution, and instead emphasizes terms of survival and parental anguish. These linguistic choices systematically reprogram the viewer's moral compass in real time. What occurs during this performance is a radical redistribution of guilt. The script subtly but aggressively reframes the corporate legal system and the pharmacy as the true moral offenders for placing a financial barrier between a child and life-saving care. The father's transgression is rendered noble, while the law's demand for order is framed as cruel and unnatural. Judge Boyd functions as the grand architect of this illusion, utilizing his artificial authority to bless the crime under the banner of universal morality. By turning a clear-cut statutory violation into a righteous act of defiance, the narrative satisfies the audience's deep-seated desire to see moral law triumph over written code. The viewer remains completely spellbound, unable to scroll away, because their baseline evolutionary ethics have been fully hijacked by a brilliantly executed script. To conclude this definitive architectural breakdown of a desperate father chose his daughter's medicine over a shoplifting charge, we must confront the final, overarching reality of this digital phenomenon: the establishment of an immortal ritual. The ultimate secret to the success of the Judge Boyd framework lies in the fact that it does not seek to solve a real-world crisis. Instead, it creates a permanent loop of algorithmic faith. Because modern societal institutions continue to grow more bureaucratic, cold, and detached from individual human suffering, the consumer's demand for simulated accountability will never be fully exhausted. The audience actively participates in a modern, digital mythology where justice is instantaneous, absolute, and visibly compassionate. From a media literacy and strategic standpoint, what we are witnessing is a fundamental shift in how human beings consume moral reassurance. In previous generations, morality plays were confined to traditional theater or religious institutions. Today, the algorithm has decentralized this ritual, embedding it directly into the daily feeds of millions of users worldwide. The viewer is fully aware, on some subconscious level, that a courtroom resolving a profound systemic failure over a shoplifting charge in less than 5 minutes is highly idealized. Yet, they willingly choose to suspend their disbelief. They choose to believe in the absolute authority of Judge Boyd because the alternative, accepting a reality where a desperate parent might simply be processed by an unfeeling administrative machine, is too emotionally painful to absorb during a casual scroll. Ultimately, the creator of this content has built something far more resilient than a single viral video. They have engineered a self-sustaining ecosystem of emotional compensation. By carefully balancing institutional symbols with raw human desperation, the narrative framework successfully heals, if only for a few minutes, a deep societal wound. As long as the real world fails to provide immediate moral clarity, these simulated courtrooms will continue to dominate the attention economy, proving that in the digital age, the performance of justice is often far more powerful than justice itself.